everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Redeeming Truth. I'm John. I'm one of the pastors at Redeemer Bible Church, and with me today is John Stonestreet. He is the president of the Colson Center. And here's the thing. We want to speak to people who are experts in various fields. And John is an expert when it comes to Christian worldview issues, particularly as it relates to culture. And so that's why we have him on. There are some significant cultural events coming up through the end of 2020 that we need help on. And in Arizona, we have a specific ballot initiative that we need to talk about. It's Prop 207. It would legalize recreational marijuana. And I have John on here because a few years ago, the state of Colorado, which is where he is right now, legalized recreational marijuana. And so they're kind of the canary in the mine, kind of. And so so John, I just want to know from your perspective what has happened. Tell us about Colorado before the law was enacted and now after.
Well, yeah, it's such a great question, and thanks, John, for having me back here. It's great to be with you. I think this is the second time, right, that Arizona now is putting recreational marijuana on the ballot. And in 2016, as I understand it from some of my friends who worked in that area down in Arizona, the thing that swerved it from being a yes vote to a no vote overall was looking at Colorado. In other words, it was basically police chiefs and folks like that have come in and said, hey, listen, this experiment, promised this, but it delivered, something else. And that's absolutely what we've seen. Now, first of all, to be clear, recreational marijuana is sold along the lines of two impulses. One is, of course, finances, right? Like the more money, the better. We'll give money to schools, da-da-da-da-da-da. And has the money come in Colorado? Yes. What's not talked about is the larger social cost. In other words, it's not a zero-sum game. As the money has come in, the costs have come in. And our police officers and our head of police, they still say out loud that this was a bad idea, that the cost of this has been to kind of social order. Particularly, we have seen an unbelievable increase in traffic accidents in Colorado since then, and you can almost see it was kind of going like this, and then when the legalization happened, that it's really taken off. The numbers are somewhere around the range of maybe 40% of drivers in Colorado would have some sort of marijuana in their system, a couple while they're driving. I mean, it just kind of goes, it just adds up. It's been crazy. The two areas where it's been, I think, particularly devastating has been the schools. It has increased. It's interesting. One of the ideas was, well, all this illegal marijuana use, then we'll just make it legal and it'll all be fine. It's actually increased underage use. The legalization has, and particularly because so much of it is in the form of edibles, and it's impossible to tell, what's the difference between a good gummy bear and a bad gummy bear. The other thing is it's been impossible to regulate in terms of the THC levels. Right. I mean, when you're dealing with edibles, then and there's not a kind of a regulatable process of how those things are produced, then what people are finding is that they're coming to Colorado, maybe going to the ski resorts, going to some of these high end, and they're finding a bite of a brownie or a bite of a cookie, and of course, all the rules are different. You're not supposed to eat the whole cookie. You're supposed to eat just a bite of it. But who eats a bite of a cookie? And nobody knows this. And then, the effects just skyrocket. And we've actually had some dramatic incidents of hallucinations. One individual thought he could fly, jumped to his death. Another one dealing with post-traumatic stress and went on a trip because of a particularly high THC level in an edible, and ended up killing his family and so on. And these are the more alarming stories, but the stories are really everywhere. And So that's the thing. It's promised on money, and it's uh, but it doesn't actually say anything about the incredible social costs. And of course, our neighboring states feel like there's absolutely no way to keep it in this state, and that's where our role as a good neighbor to our Western, neighbors has kind of gone out the window. The other way that marijuana is sold is not just in promises of money. And by the way, can I just say that if a policy if a policy is primarily sold on money as opposed to the cultural good, then this should absolutely be a red flag, right?
Mm.
In other words, it's appealing to a base instinct that we have. It's appealing to just, and by the way, the school districts who were promised the vast majority of that money have not seen, even though the overall total has been high, the school districts haven't seen that amount of money. And of course, we're still dealing on the ballot this year with how much money should go to schools and should we increase money to schools. And what we were promised is that marijuana was going to solve all that.
Mm.
The other way it's sold, and this is, I think, especially true of Western states like Arizona and Colorado, is that we have this libertarian impulse, right? This libertarian, like, don't tell us what not to do. But that's just a misunderstanding of the human condition. We need, the law as a teacher. We need people sometimes to say, don't do that. Don't speed. Don't steal. Don't exploit your workers. These things actually tell us how to live in a way for the common good. And that's the role of the law, is to protect citizens. And the idea that it should just be legal because it's available, it just completely misunderstands who we are as people and what the role the law needs to play in our lives.
So is this a loving your neighbor kind of issue? Voting no on 207 here in Arizona. In my mind, there are passages in the Bible that speak against drug use. Passages in the Bible that would apply to drug use, like not getting drunk, Ephesians 5.
Mm-hmm.
There's a social cost, there's a neighbor cost, there's family cost. And so underneath the umbrella of loving your neighbor, it seems to me that a no vote on 207 would fit.
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, I think that's exactly right. It's a love for your children. I mean, look, you don't, do you want a sort of society that's ordered around our base instincts? And is that the sort of society you want to raise children in? Where what people are actually living for. And this is the thing about marijuana. I know a lot of people compare it to alcohol. I mean, and look, just because alcohol, whatever you think about whether alcohol should be illegal, even if it should be illegal, that doesn't mean then because it's legal, you let marijuana be legal. First of all, I mean, that's just bad thinking. It's bad logic. But secondly, there's a fundamental difference between something that at least can be used around social gatherings, can be used in a moderate way that doesn't lead to the level of destruction or something like that, and something that inherently its use does two things to us. First of all, it's used with an intent to be intoxicated. Let me say that again. It's used with the intent to be intoxicated. There's not a middle ground. You're not using this as a social lubricant. You're not using this as something to enjoy. You're actually using this in order to get high, right? And it intentionally isolates us, right? You don't. This is like pornography. The more you go down that road, the more isolated you are from relationships. Recreational marijuana doesn't build community. Recreational marijuana isolates us all into our own little heads of intoxication. These aren't things that are good. And Christians should be about the common good. These don't build societies in which our neighbors can be loved. And so, yeah, I think that's such a great point, John, that you made. This falls into the love your neighbor category.
So, John, if people want to know more about your ministry, how do they get connected to that?
Yeah, our website is called breakpoint.org. That's one way to go. If you are a podcast listener, we do a daily commentary on the culture, just 3.5 to 4 minutes, really bite-sized. And we've covered this issue of recreational marijuana more than a few times. And we continue, by the way, to see data that comes out of this. I didn't mention this, John, but there is increasing, the studies are increasing that are showing a correlation. Now, again, difference between correlation and causation is important. So let's be clear on what it can and can't demonstrate. But there's an increasing amount of studies that tell us that marijuana use is correlated with worsening mental health. So if you take, again, not a sufficient condition in and of itself, but a necessary condition, the kind of the downhill spiral of mental health is worsened by marijuana use from our best data. And by the way, we're going to see more of that data come out after COVID lockdowns. So anyway, that's an example of the sort of thing we talk about. If you're a podcast guy, just go to the Breakpoint podcast on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
And then what about email?
Yeah, if you can go to breakpoint.org and sign up for the daily emails. And so you can listen to it on the podcast or you can read it. We'll send it to you in your email box. I tell you what, one of the coolest things I hear, John, is from parents who say, you have given us something to talk about with our teenagers at dinner, which I think is so cool because we want to have real conversations, right, with our kids at dinner time. And in fact, I do Breakpoint, and my wife and I use Breakpoint with our kids at dinner time often. So anyway, that's a cool way to use it. And emails, you can print them off. They're 2 pages, very digestible and usable.
Thank you for that, John. Hopefully, I would encourage all of you watching to go sign up for those emails, download the podcast. I know I do. I get it in my inbox. Incredibly important, incredibly helpful to think through issues from the Christian worldview. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time for another episode of Redeeming Truth.